I'm Jean Gray, publisher of American Entrepreneurship Today and host of the podcast series Experience Voices, where I talk with highly accomplished people who share the critical elements that led to their success. With the emergence of artificial intelligence, entrepreneurs now see opportunities to tackle problems previously considered too complex to solve. Our guest today on Experience Voices is Vitaly Golomb, co-founder and CEO of Sofielabs, the next-generation CRM that uses AI to automate the sales process. Vitaly is a seasoned Silicon Valley entrepreneur and investor, and most notably co-founded HP's corporate venture arm. Welcome to Experience Voices, Vitaly.
Thanks for having me, Jean.
So let's discuss your company, Sofielabs, which I understand is going to be disruptive in the CRM space. So share with our listeners what your business model is and why it will be disruptive.
Well, time to time in the tech world, we find ourselves with the ability to reimagine and disrupt, the same old problems with a new generation of technology. And obviously, the new generation of technology that we're talking about in 2024 is generative artificial intelligence. And, it's a buzzword, it's flying around and everybody's very excited and hyped up about it. But we founded the company a couple of years ago to look at commercial applications of autonomous agents. So that means looking at things that will make a big impact for companies, for businesses, for enterprises. And the area we zeroed in on is really enabling sales ops, right? So companies, B2B companies especially, they sell through relationships. They spend almost half of their budget on marketing and sales. And it's really becoming a noisy marketplace out there, and it's very difficult to break through. So it requires automation. And what we're doing specifically with our first product, Engage, is we're kind of getting in the middle of that, in the middle of that pie. So you have your marketing operations that, do events and email marketing, what have you, advertising. They bring people to the website. People fill out a form on the website after looking at some products, and they're expecting an appointment with an account manager or account executive to pitch them the product, give them a demo, etc. What happens in the middle there is usually something really painful for most companies, and that's what we focus on is the automation there. So we can kind of talk a little bit more detail, but that's generally the area that we're operating in.
And you referred to the individuals in the middle as sales development reps?
Yeah. So what we have is, the first people that will take those leads that come in, those prospects, and that first encounter that the prospect will have is usually with a sales development rep, an inbound sales development rep, an SDR. And who's an SDR? An SDR is typically, it's an entry-level sales or marketing job for somebody straight out of college with very little training. And you can imagine that's the first impression that is out there for your customers is this interaction with an SDR. And what happens, if you kind of look into the sausage factory a little bit, what's happening is that, you recruit 2 or 3 SDRs to keep one in a month or two. And if they're good, in the best case scenario, a few months later, they become an account executive and they start doing the next step of the process. And you, as a person running that business, trying to scale that sales team that sales for the company, is you're doing that process over and over again. So it's very expensive to recruit, train, and retain this particular group within your whole marketing and sales organization. And what we're doing is we're effectively automating that. And nobody really, nobody is going, my kids weren't growing up and going, one day I'm going to be an SDR. Even if they want to go into business, it's kind of this grunt work. It's kind of this entry level manure shoveling, pardon my expression, of the sales and marketing world. And we're really replacing that with automation that not only frees up these people to actually do more valuable things and ultimately kind of makes life easier for account executives, but it's a qualitative and quantitative improvement to the whole sales operation.
So I hear a lot about AI automation. So can you spend a little time in describing, in say layperson's terms, what does AI automation mean?
AI automation is essentially, you're automating a certain task that happens in a predictable way, but the artificial intelligence has some kind of a decision-making process, right? So, for example, in the world of CRMs, forever we've had this idea of sequences. So the sequence could be, okay, this happens, then we send this email, then we wait a day or two. If they don't answer, we send email number 2. If they don't answer, we send email number 3. And then if they don't answer, we just take them out of the sequence, right? So that's very linear, very simple kind of automation. But with artificial intelligence, like for example, in our case, what we're doing is somebody sends in a request. Within the first 2 minutes, what we do is we will go to their LinkedIn. We will go to their company's LinkedIn. We'll go to the company's website, and we gather intelligence. We understand who is this person? What is their role in that company? What is that company? How does that relate to the product that we are selling, right? Because we have the playbook, the sales playbook for the company. And then we have our own sales best practices. And in under 2 minutes, we can have a very personalized, very custom response to that prospect in 35 languages, 24 hours a day, with qualifying questions. So they submit, it could be as simple as their name and email address, right? The simpler the form, the more chances you're going to get people to actually fill it out. So they fill it out, and within 2 minutes, they get a response saying, well, hello, John, thanks for your inquiry form about such and such product. We saw that this is, what you were interested in on our website. And we understand you're from so-and-so company, and we imagine that this could be very useful for your company in such and such way. I just have 3 questions for you to then set up an appointment with an account executive to give you a full demo, right? And those 3 questions will be always personalized, always custom, that are qualifying questions that do 2 things. First of all, because we answer so quickly, we have the chance, in sales generally, kind of the general rule of thumb is whoever answers first will usually get the deal. In kind of this world where we're talking about digital marketing and qualification, the stat published by HBR, by Harvard Business Review, is that if you don't answer within the first 5 minutes, your chances of qualifying that lead fall by 90%, right? So we answer in 2 minutes. We could answer faster, but it's going to feel strange if we know all these things about this person and have this personalized response too quickly, right? We have to at least kind of put on a show that somebody is doing the work and it feels like, it's human scale. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that we're also a gatekeeper, and we protect the account executive's time, because what happens now is about half the time that they get on a sales appointment, it's not really a qualified lead. It might be a company that generally fits the profile, but they're nowhere near ready to buy, right? They're just kind of doing basic research. They're 6 months or a year away from buying, right? So SDRs, they are very eager, and they'll set up these appointments, and half the time, literally that's a statistic, half the time they're unqualified appointments, and the account executive, the first thing they do is they get on the call, they ask a couple of questions to requalify it, and they know half the time, they roll their eyes back, they know it's an unqualified lead, they're about to waste an hour of their day, giving them a demo. So for us, we're a gatekeeper, and for those that are not sales qualified, we'll actually nurture them. So we'll come back and we'll follow up with them in 30 days or in 6 months or what have you, and try to requalify them and set up that appointment. So net kind of, being able to answer really quickly, really personalized way, and then also gatekeeping. What we're seeing in our pilot now is that we're able to set up 3 times more qualified calls for the sales reps without increasing the marketing budget. So that's a tremendous effect when you're talking about half of your company's budget being marketing and sales. That's a tremendous, advantage that companies that are using automation like ours have over their competitors.
Is the process fully automated in the sense that a lot of what you described a person was doing, you're doing the information gathering, so the customer or the prospect on the other side, are they receiving a text or an email or even a virtual voice? Or is there still a person that is still in the intermediary role?
So because we're doing this interaction 24 hours a day, that first interaction, that first response is completely automated, right? And that happens within 2 minutes. But on average, it takes about 9 touch points, 9 back and forth. And we're talking about usually about emails when we're talking about B2B sales, kind of going back and forth with them to set up the appointment, answer some basic questions, etc. So the way our system is set up, it really is kind of like a virtual human, because they have an account in the CRM just like anybody else has one. They have their own inbox, they have a name. And what you can see in the CRM, you can actually break in at any point if it becomes complicated, or for some reason you want to break into the conversation, much like you would with any kind of junior SDR if you're kind of a sales manager. You can do that. But otherwise, if you just let it go, it's a completely automated process. You can see all of the communication recorded in the CRM. We enrich the contact. We provide a lot of information from LinkedIn, public sources, Zoom info, etc. But we also have our own database that we're accumulating over time, which is more behavioral, right? Because as we encounter people again and again in our network with that professional email address, right, as the unique identifier, we get to know them. We know approximately when they answer emails. We know if they respond quickly to short emails or long emails. We get to know them. We know how to talk to them and how to better formulate, a conversation with them, which is really magical. And it's fascinating to see, some of these conversations in our pilot. We're really passing this Turing test, right? Which was really the Turing test for those who are hearing this for the first time. It's really figuring out if you can, for lack of a better word, fool a person into thinking that they're talking to another human. And in our case, absolutely, they feel like they're speaking to a human who's giving them, the information they're looking for and is being helpful and is responding very quickly to their requests.
So as you're entering a CRM space that I understand is very dominated by HubSpot and Salesforce. So stepping back to maybe the origin of the idea to do this startup, what was your thinking that you could take on such dominant players?
Great question. I mean, first of all, right now, the way our system works, it works within whatever setup you have. So if you're using Salesforce and you have, 100 sales reps and you have all these systems set up and you've taken years to build it out, we just integrate right into it. Salesforce, HubSpot, et cetera. As you can imagine, as we build our system out further, right now we're kind of in the middle of that sandwich. We're the ham in the sandwich. But there's certainly lots to do and lots to improve on the marketing side, kind of on the inbound and automation that could be helpful for the marketing team. Not necessarily replace it, but certain things that could be much more efficient there. And also on the sales side, when we set up the appointment with the account executive, there's a lot of things that they have to do. They have to do the call, they have to analyze the call, they probably have to put together a proposal. So there's a number of things that we'll be doing after the fact. So you can imagine we're kind of going middle out where we're creating this value and automation throughout. The issue with incumbents, and this always happens with every next generation of technology, is that they have a decision to make. Are they going to completely cannibalize their existing business and redesign their product and sell something new? Are they going to try to kind of slow walk the whole industry and try to get there, eventually? So that's the opportunity for startups, is to actually go in and do something, solve the same old problem, but do it 10 times faster, better, cheaper, using new technology as leverage. And that's the advantage that we have as a startup, is that we don't have this baggage. We're not a publicly traded company that has certain revenue that it has to keep up and have to worry about being destructive and disruptive to our own product. So that's really the approach, and kind of to generalize it, that's startups in general.
And who are the target customers?
We're currently working on the pilot, as I mentioned, and we target companies who have some kind of sales velocity. They have a certain size of sales team. A lot of SaaS companies are a perfect fit for us because that's how they sell. They have an average contract value of $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000. They have this 3-step process. Marketing creates demand and brings people to the website, usually our landing page, and they have the SDRs, then they have the account executives. So that's one easy target there is companies, software companies or services companies. But we see in the future we can expand to things like professional services. When you're talking about lawyers and investment bankers, et cetera, who are out there and they're marketing themselves and they're creating a brand for themselves, and then it all falls down when somebody comes to them and tries to contact through the website, and they don't hear from them for days, right? So, and those are very valuable customers for them. So we can imagine going into that direction, and ultimately any kind of B2B sales structure, our system could be very helpful in.
So you have a very deep background, and I see you've been in venture capital. So in your type of company, because there are so many AI startups now, and people are fundraising, are they going to venture capital firms that claim that they're really good at AI? Or are they going to venture capital firms in their industry who are now seeking AI startups?
Well, whenever there's a new technology wave, the hype is around the particular vertical, right? So We thought that mobile was a vertical, or social was a vertical, or the internet was a vertical before that. But reality is that really when it's a true wave, it's a horizontal, and it affects all industries, and it goes kind of across. It's a new technology era. And maybe, right now it's starting to mature a little bit. The market's understanding that, we're not AI investors, we're investors in, what have you industry with that experience and that network in there. But we understand that all the new solutions are going to incorporate some kind of AI, some kind of automation to rethink the solutions to old problems from before. So, the short answer is, everybody is all of a sudden an AI investor, and they have to get smart about how this works, how this will affect their particular industries that they're interested in. We're in the software space ultimately, and most Silicon Valley investors are, well aware of kind of the software business model, software space, and we're somewhat generalized from that perspective. But you can see, I spent years in investment banking focusing on mobility and climate tech. And even in those categories, obviously, one of the first commercial applications of AI was autonomous driving, right? That's a very difficult AI problem. Or in the energy space, you can see that AI is being used to make decisions at a very high pace about how energy gets generated and stored, etc. So everything is going to be, we're in the AI era, right? So everything is going to be infected with this particular technology wave, and you're going to see, completely new ways of rethinking the same old problems, but also solving things that weren't solvable before, right? So I'm pretty excited about what's going to be happening in bioengineering and in medicine with the help of AI that just wasn't possible before.
For startups that, as we just discussed, are AI startups, what is the challenge, or is there a challenge in finding the talent to recruit into a startup? Because AI is taking off, so quickly. Is there a shortage? Is more AI talent on the West Coast, and people should be looking that way for team building?
Well, I grew up in Silicon Valley, and ever since I can remember, there was always a shortage of talent, engineering talent, technical talent, because there's always more ideas of what to build than there are people who can actually build it. What's interesting and what's happened since COVID is that, COVID kind of forced us to think remote, and it's become really accepted to kind of have this remote workforce from all over the world. So you're seeing a lot more of that in the last, half decade. Even my last startup, which is a decade ago now, which I sold in 2015, which is an e-commerce platform, I had the same challenge. And, back over 10 years ago in Silicon Valley, just couldn't compete with the big tech companies in trying to attract top talent, top technical talent. So what I did is went into Kiev, Ukraine, and built an engineering office there, and then kept all the sales and marketing here in Bay Area. So that's a very common template, because it's very difficult for startups to compete with big tech, especially because that's it's a very certain job security to a certain degree. The stock is very valuable. That's part of it. And talented engineers could be making, investment banker or hedge fund type of income in Bay Area, and they know it.
So that's making it particularly hard for entrepreneurs who are not techies. And if they're out there looking for a tech partner, they've got quite a hurdle to overcome. They can't pay them for what they're getting somewhere else. Are they, by definition, having to, create a partnership to go forward in these models?
It's exceedingly rare for, tech-based startups, software companies, or especially deep technology, which is research-based, to have non-technical founders. I'm fortunate to have a co-founder. We've been friends for a very long time. We complement each other very well. We both ran companies, both sold companies, but my background is design and human computer interface, way back in my educational background. And Jonathan, my co-founder, he's more on the technology side. And even though he's been running companies for the last, decade and a half, he actually is very current and with his hands in the code. And he wrote, the first lines of code in our product. So it's absolutely necessary when you have a tech-based product, is you have people who are technology specialists, even if they're not writing code, if they're managing the team, they need to understand within a certain scale, how long things take and what technology to use, etc. With AI, it's very, very technical. And I would say it's almost impossible to start a company without, at least most, if not all, the founders being somewhat very technical.
Now, I understand that you came out of stealth. So can you share a little bit about your thinking of being in stealth? How unusual is that?
It's pretty common, right? Because what we're doing is we're doing experiments. And as I mentioned, hence the name Sofielabs, is we started kind of a lab to run experiments, find commercial applications of this particular technology. Autonomous agents is what it's called. And we tried a few different ideas before we landed on what we've built in this Engage product. And that allowed us to kind of experiment and get that feedback. Although we're, more than average experienced entrepreneurs, that actually told us that we need to talk to customers and users very early on, get feedback. The idea is that, if you think that you already know everything and you're there building a product and investing millions of dollars in a couple of years of your life, very likely you're going to come out of stealth, or introduce a product to the world and it's going to flop, right? You're going to get an unexpected response. So the next stage for us is now to kind of, okay, we've built initial product, we've tested it on companies very close to us. We know it works well. We're now ready to start talking to kind of the next step, next degree of separation, companies that are portfolio companies of our investors, that are kind of our cousins, let's say, and then more to the public companies that we don't know, that just fit the profile and want to work with us. We start working with them in this pilot phase. And then ultimately we'll get to a public release where anybody will be able to sign up and be able to take advantage of Sophie in our business.
If I'm an entrepreneur thinking that I want to keep things, behind the wall, hidden, would I be approaching, you're saying these entities are close to you. Do you guys use non-disclosure agreements in those cases, or are you really just relying on those trusted relationships?
Yeah, it's not so much about kind of the cat being out of the bag. I wrote a book years ago. There it is. It's become a bestseller in the startup world. If somebody can steal your idea just by knowing about it, you probably don't have much of a business, right? You have to have some secret sauce that's difficult or impossible to replicate. So we're not so afraid of somebody like taking our idea and having them sign an NDA. But it is important for us to kind of validate and understand what it is that we're building, how we're going to position it to the market, who our customers are, just so we don't waste time and resources kind of just doing this in public. The bigger mistake, I think, is a lot of entrepreneurs stay in stealth for too long. They think that they know exactly what they need to build, and they're sitting there, especially when you have entrepreneurs who are just purely engineers that have never gone to market to sell something. They will tend to have this concept that they already know what the solution is. And I can tell you that's often not the case. You might have a hypothesis, but you're going to get really interesting feedback and you're going to learn things every time you talk to customers, especially early on, who are going to just react to it from their context and think about, how would this work in my business? What are my fears? What am I excited about? How do I practically set this up? How long does it take? All those things really are kind of the meat and potatoes of getting a technology product out there, and then figuring out, in turn, how we are going to market to the world, what our sales cycle looks like. All those kind of things are kind of next step. But the important thing is to get what's called product market fit, to figure out who's our customer, what problem we're solving for them, and ultimately for them to recognize the same thing and be excited about using your product and wanting to ultimately, pay for it.
What's your next big step? You're saying you're in a pilot. Is that something that's going to run for 6 months, or you have a couple of milestones that you're looking to pass?
Yeah, I think it's more of it's not really a step function. It's, for us, this is kind of the next logical step, and things kind of accelerate gradually and expand from there. So from the pilot, we're going to keep, opening it up to a wider and wider audience until we stop calling it a pilot and it becomes a public release. Obviously for us, from a standpoint of how we think about the business is, we've been largely financing the business ourselves. Not everybody can do that. The next step for us, though, is to have enough proof points to go out there and raise a substantial venture round which will really allow us to expand much quicker and grow the business.
Well, you've built companies before, like you mentioned your e-commerce company. So when you're going through these different stages, especially when you're in your pilot phase and you're trying to build traction in the market, how hard or difficult is it to make that transition to build the next iteration of your product at the same time you're trying to bring in sufficient demand to attract an investor?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a either or, it's not a start stop. It's everything happens all at once, right? And this is why you have division of responsibilities in the company. Is you have somebody responsible for, continuously improving the product and listening to the feedback from users and customers. And you have the commercial side of the business doing something similar, figuring out, okay, what works on the marketing and sales side, what doesn't work, and continuously improving that. The adage is, a lot of founders, a lot of startups, they put together an idea. The idea is really untested, and they go out there, they go running after investors. And they spend 80% of their time out there chasing investors when they should be instead getting those proof points and chasing customers, right? Because at the end of the day, the goal of a startup is to be a startup for the shortest possible period of time, meaning it's an experiment looking for a business model, and you need to get there and start focusing on building a business as soon as possible. That's something that a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially young first-time entrepreneurs, that's what they don't realize is that, you don't need to be going to every conference and, wasting the hours of your day chasing investors and kind of looking at the industry. You need to go out there and talk to customers, and then the investors will come to you. So that's really, that's something that comes from experience and doing this for a couple of decades and figuring and kind of seeing the signals, what works and what doesn't.
That was one of the questions that I was wondering about is, given that you have all this experience, are you better today at setting your milestones than when you had your first company? Because that's what the investors want to latch on to, is that your ability to communicate when certain things are going to happen and you deliver upon what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, what you will learn, with every generation of technology, everything is, you kind of throw it in the salad mixer again and spin it around and everything's different. But the whole point of a startup is nobody's ever done this before in quite the same way. So you have to kind of figure it out along the way. Otherwise, if you're just copying something that was already done, then you're not going to be able to build that giant value in the company and go from zero to hero very quickly. So yeah, it's the experience that you do have is that you start realizing, it's more like psychology and being a little bit more stoic about it, if I may say. You're not trying to make yourself busy. You're not going out there and saying, just adding tasks to your list, like, we have to go find an office and then we have to go and fill it with furniture and then hang the pictures on the walls. No. None of those things matter to the business, right? The business doesn't care if you have a nice office. And it's really easy to feel busy when you're not doing things that are productive and you're just waiting for something to happen to your company. So that's probably the biggest difference, is that going out there and figuring out what's important, what to focus on, what those positive signals are, and where not to waste time. That's probably the thing that comes from experience the most. And, on the other hand, being a little bit more experienced entrepreneurs, the expectations from investors that we talk to are higher for us, right? The bar is higher, and as it should be, the bar for ourselves is higher because we already can avoid a lot of the mistakes that we've made in the past without having that experience.
But is there like a real source of anxiety among the team members of making the build and then realizing that you need a certain amount of significant investment to get to another milestone, which is further down the road? Is that a gulp moment that a lot of entrepreneurs and tech entrepreneurs realize, they have to get through certain stages, but if they don't have the funding, it really becomes difficult to go forward?
Yeah, I mean, funding to scale, and when you get overwhelmed with all the things that have to be done, that's kind of a high-class problem if you think about it, because things are working, right?
Right.
And when that happens, you're going to get noticed anyway, and you're going to have investors knocking on your door, right? Because your company is working, something is scaling really quickly. And sure, yeah, you can drop a lot of balls in that period and kind of break a lot of things. Again, that's what with experience you kind of are able to see a little bit down the road, and you don't get overwhelmed with banal things. So that's kind of the high class issue. The more common issue is that you're running out of money because you wasted a bunch of time. Time is money, right? You raised X amount of money, you're burning Z amount of money every month, every day, and you just thought things are going to be a lot quicker and you're going to be more successful than you are. 95% of the time, that's what happens. And the companies run out of money because they just didn't move fast enough and didn't make best use of the capital that they were able to raise and get to that next milestone. And that next milestone is really all around kind of commercial questions. It's, are customers responding? Have you figured out who the customer is? Are they willing to buy the product at X price? Are you able to find them fast enough? Those are the things you have to focus on. So it's really when you raise money, the race begins, right? A lot of founders, they raise money and they put out a press release and everybody congratulates them. Congratulations on raising money, but that's not the end. That's just the beginning. That's the beginning of the next phase. And you have to run very, very quickly to outrun, before that money gets spent, before that money disappears. You need to hit the next milestones to grow the business. So again, if it's the reverse and you get overwhelmed with all these things that have to happen, you have to think about that positively. That means the experiment is working, and now you need to figure out, okay, how do we scale this? Who do we, what kind of people do we need to recruit to put around this company? What's the next step? And if it's really working, it's not going to be that difficult to find money.
Well, you've shared a lot of great advice here in our conversation for entrepreneurs. Is there any specific pitfall about an AI startup? Are all startups alike, or in this AI era, you're seeing something that separates out certain AI startups doing well versus others?
Yeah, I mean, probably, if we were going to talk general type of ideas, you have to kind of avoid the hype, right? Going out there and just talking AI just for the sake of AI because it's popular, okay, that works for a little while, but at a certain point, we get this trough of disillusionment and people don't want to hear it, right? It becomes kind of overhyped. Instead, you want to focus on, who's your customer, what value are you providing to them, and just really practical things, building a business that, there are customers that are happy to pay for your product because you're making them more successful or you're making their life easier, whatever it is. So it's really important to focus on those aspects and not just get wrapped up in the hype and the parties and the conferences and what have you. Just focus on building the business if that's your goal, right? Otherwise, you have to be honest with yourself and say, no, that's not my goal. I'm doing this for lifestyle. I like to go and walk around and have people praise me because I'm a AI founder. But we're a little bit past that age to where that's not important to us anymore, right? I'd rather spend time with my family on vacation than go to the conference number 17 for the year.
So we touched upon this before about AI talent. So where should an entrepreneur be looking? So we're not assuming that all entrepreneurs are in the Valley. New York is, a really big tech hub now. Are there places that they should be gravitating to, or particular, say, accelerators that they should try to compete and be accepted into an accelerator?
Sure. I mean, accelerators are a great step, especially for new technology entrepreneurs, because what an accelerator does is in a certain period of time, hence the name, you fill the gaps in your knowledge very quickly and you get access to a network and you get some money, right? Relatively small amount of money. So accelerators are great and they serve their purpose. And that's why they've been around for 2 decades now. I've been involved with a dozen accelerators as a mentor, board member, etc. So what I would say is that there's this concept called clusters of innovation. And the clusters of innovation, Silicon Valley being probably number one in the world, hands down, they have several different players. And those players are universities who are pumping out technology talent and business talent. There are various governments, local and federal, for example, who are creating the economic conditions for all of this to thrive and putting the right incentives in place. And you have, professionals that surround a particular industry, accountants and lawyers, etc., who specialize and understand that industry. They're in market day to day. They can be very helpful in filling those gaps for you. Kind of don't underestimate that. So that if you look at it kind of holistically, there's a couple of key components that you need that are, for example, like top technical universities to give you kind of top talent. A few years ago during COVID, everybody got excited about Miami, but that was kind of fool's gold because there's not a top 20 technical university within 1,000 miles of Miami, right? So how are you going to get all those engineers? Are you going to put them into 5-star high rises? It's just not going to happen. And you can see the results now, right? Things kind of hyped up and they kind of slow down and they're growing, but they're not really on the level of obviously of Silicon Valley, New York, LA, or Boston for that matter, right? 10 years ago, the hype was about Austin. At least Austin has, a couple of colleges not too far and a really interesting environment that's a fun city for relatively young people. So you can see how that developed. Internationally, it's really interesting what happened in the UK, in Estonia, which is a tiny country where there was a Skype mafia, which was a group that built Skype and then started investing in all the other startups that were coming out of it in the region. The type of things that were the type of support that the Singapore government gave to the ecosystem and the type of laws they passed where, for example, most technology companies that are founded in Southeast Asia are incorporated in Singapore, right? It's kind of become the Delaware of Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of different things that can happen. And when you're, if you're a young person and you're thinking, okay, I want to, I'm ambitious and I want to do something big with my life, and you happen to come out of a small town in the middle of kind of nowhere or, in an industry that specializes in an industry that you're not interested in and you're interested in tech, if you're going to be an actor, you're going to move to Hollywood to try to be, a world-class actor. If you're a world-class technologist and you have the opportunity, you're probably going to move to Silicon Valley or to one of these other areas, right? So for example, financial technology, fintech, insurance technology, very strong in New York, anything around media and content, very strong in LA. And then obviously any kind of deep technology that has global appeal will be in Silicon Valley, for the foreseeable future. Not to say that other areas aren't producing great companies, but if you had to flip a coin and say, okay, I need to move, where am I going to move? The highest potential areas are pretty obvious.
So Vitaly, you're in the pilot phase. Are you looking for early stage companies or established companies to be part of the pilot?
So that's why we're doing a little bit of a media tour now, is that we're kind of opening the kimono and we'd like to invite companies to join our pilot. They can do so on our website, sofielabs.com, sofielabs.com. And we'll reach out to them and talk to them and figure out what their sales process looks like and how we can integrate Sophie Engage and show them a lot of value and give them a step up, on their competition.
If they're a good match, is this when you do a pilot? Are you paying customer or it's handled differently?
During the pilot, it's completely free, and it's important for us. We're getting a lot of value out of it because we're getting the feedback to tune our product, and then eventually we'll be announcing our kind of commercial accounts and all of that.
Well, Vitaly, you have shared a lot of information in our short time. So I want to thank you for being on Experience Voices, being so forthcoming about your background and where you're taking Sofielabs. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You have been listening to the podcast series Experience Voices. To hear more and subscribe, visit AmericanEntrepreneurship.com/podcast, where you will also find a form for listener feedback.